Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
And I'm Dan.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time, we continued reading from chapter 19. Beren and Felagund alone remained of the captives of Sauron. Sauron sent a wolf to kill Beren, but Felagund slayed it with his bare hands. Felagund was mortally wounded, and Beren mourned him. Lúthien and Huan came to rescue him, and Huan successfully fought off the father of the werewolves of Angband. Sauron took the form of a werewolf to fight Huan, knowing that it was his fate to die by a werewolf. Lúthien and Huan overcame him, and he fled to the north. The people of Nargothrond came to follow Orodreth, and saw that Curufin and Celegorm were blameworthy in the death of their king Finrod Felagund, and thus banished them from Nargothrond. Later, Curufin and Celegorm ambushed Beren and Lúthien, hoping to kill him and capture her. Huan decided to betray his master and helped Beren and Lúthien to escape. Beren decided to continue his quest to take a Silmaril. Lúthien and Huan, disguised as a vampire and a werewolf, caught up to him. Beren tried to dissuade Lúthien from willfully entering such dangers, but Huan spoke for the second time, counseling him that as long as his fate was tied to the Silmarils, Lúthien could not be free from the shadow of Morgoth. Beren and Lúthien took up the disguises and started northward. Today, we continue reading chapter 9, beginning on page 179 of the second edition. They passed through all perils until they came with the dust of their long and weary road upon them to the drear dale that lay before the gate of Angband. Black chasms opened beside the road, whence forms as of writhing serpents issued. On either hand the cliffs stood as embattled walls, and upon them sat carrion fowl, crying with fell voices. Before them was the impregnable gate, an arch wide and dark at the foot of the mountain. Above it reared 1,000 feet of precipice. There dismay took them, for at the gate was a guard, of whom no tidings had yet gone forth. Rumor of he knew not what designs abroad among the princes of elves had come to Morgoth, and ever down the aisles of the forest was heard the baying of Huan, the great hound of war, whom long ago the Valar unleashed. Then Morgoth recalled the doom of Huan, and he chose one from among the whelps of the race of Draugluin, and fed him with his own hand upon living flesh, and put his power upon him. Swiftly the wolf grew, until he could creep into no den, but lay huge and hungry before the feet of Morgoth. There the fire and anguish of hell entered into him, and he became filled with a devouring spirit, tormented, terrible, and strong. Carcharoth, the Red Maw, he is named in the tales of those days, and Anfoglir, the Jaws of Thirst. And Morgoth set him to lie unsleeping before the doors of Angband, lest Huan come. Now Carcharoth espied them from afar, and he was filled with doubt, for news had long been brought to Angband that Draugluin was dead. Therefore, when they approached, he denied them entry, and bade them stand, and he drew near with menace, scenting something strange in the air about them. But suddenly some power descended from of old, from divine race, possessed Lúthien, and casting back her foul raiment, she stood forth, small before the might of Carcharoth, but radiant and terrible. Lifting up her hand, she commanded him to sleep, saying, "O woe-begotten spirit, fall now into dark oblivion, and forget for a while the dreadful doom of life. And Carcharoth was felled, and as though lightning had smitten him. Then Beren and Lúthien went through the gate and down the labyrinthine stairs, and together wrought the greatest deed that has been dared by elves or men. For they came to the seat of Morgoth in his nethermost hall, that was upheld by horror, lit by fire, filled with weapons of death and torment. There, Beren slunk in wolf's form beneath his throne. But Lúthien was stripped of her disguise by the will of Morgoth, and he bent his gaze upon her. She was not daunted by his eyes, and she named her own name and offered her service to sing before him after the manner of a minstrel. Then Morgoth, looking upon her beauty, conceived in his thought an evil lust, and a design more dark than any that had yet come into his heart since he fled from Valinor. Thus he was beguiled by his own malice, for he watched her, leaving free for a while, and taking secret pleasure in his thought. Then suddenly she eluded his sight, and out of the shadow began a song of such surpassing loveliness and of such blinding power that he listened perforce, and a blindness came upon him, and his eyes roamed to and fro seeking her. All his court were cast down in slumber, and all the fires faded and were quenched, but the Silmarils in the crown on Morgoth's head blazed forth suddenly with a radiance of white flame. And the burden of that crown and of the jewels bowed down his head, as though the world were set upon it, laden with the weight of care, of fear, and of desire that even the will of Morgoth could not support. Then Lúthien, catching up her winged robe, sprang into the air, and her voice came down like rain into pools, profound and dark. She cast her cloak before his eyes, and set upon him a dream, dark as the outer void where once he walked alone. Suddenly he fell, as a hill sliding in avalanche, and hurled like thunder from his throne, lay prone upon the floors of hell. The iron crown rolled, echoing from his head. All things were still. As a dead beast, Beren lay upon the ground. But Lúthien, touching him with her hand, aroused him, and he cast aside the wolf hame. Then he drew forth the knife Angrist, and from the iron claws that held it, he cut the Silmaril. As he closed it in his hand, the radiance welled through his living flesh, and his hand became as a shining lamp. But the jewel suffered his touch and hurt him not. It came then into Beren's mind that he would go beyond his vow, and bear out of Angband all three of the jewels of Feanor. But such was not the doom of the Silmarils. The knife Angrist snapped, and a shard of the blade flying smote the cheek of Morgoth. He groaned and stirred, and all the host of Angband moved in sleep. Then terror fell upon Beren and Lúthien, and they fled heedless and without disguise, desiring only to see the light once more. They were neither hindered nor pursued, but the gate was held against their going out, for Carcharoth had arisen from sleep, and stood now in wrath upon the threshold of Angband. Before they were aware of him, he saw them, and sprang upon them as they ran. Lúthien was spent, and she had not time nor strength to quell the wolf, but Beren strode forth before her, and in his right hand he held aloft the Silmaril. Carcharoth halted, and for a moment was afraid. "Get you gone and fly," cried Beren, "for here is a fire that shall consume you, and all evil things." And he thrust the Silmaril before the eyes of the wolf. But Carcharoth looked upon that holy jewel and was not daunted, and the devouring spirit within him awoke to sudden fire, and gaping, he took suddenly the hand within his jaws, and he bit it off at the wrist. Then swiftly, all his inwards were filled with a flame of anguish, and the Silmaril seared his accursed flesh. Howling, he fled before them, and the walls of the valley of the gate echoed with that clamor of his torment. So terrible did he become in his madness, that all the creatures of Morgoth that abode in that valley, or were upon any of the roads that led thither, fled far away. For he slew all living things that stood in his path, and burst from the north with ruin upon the world. Of all the terrors that came ever into Beleriand, ere Angband's fall, the madness of Carcharoth was the most dreadful, for the power of the Silmaril was hidden within him. Now Beren lay in a swoon within the perilous gate, and death drew nigh him, for there was venom on the fangs of the wolf. Lúthien with her lips drew out the venom, and she put forth her failing power to staunch the hideous wound. But behind her in the depths of Angband, the rumor grew of great wrath aroused. The hosts of Morgoth were awakened. Thus the quest of the Silmaril was like to have ended in ruin and despair. But in that hour above the wall of the valley, 3 mighty birds appeared, flying northward with wings swifter than the wind. Among all birds and beasts, the wandering and need of Beren had been noised, and Huan himself had bidden all things watch, that they might bring him aid. High above the realm of Morgoth, Thorondor and his vassals soared, and seeing now the madness of the wolf and Beren's fall, they came swiftly down, even as the powers of Angband were released from the toils of sleep. Then they lifted up Lúthien and Beren from the earth and bore them aloft into the clouds. Below them suddenly thunder rolled, lightnings leaped upward, and the mountains quaked. Fire and smoke belched forth from Thungorodrim, and flaming bolts were hurled far abroad, falling ruinous upon the lands. And the Noldor and Hithlum trembled. But Thorondor took his way far above the earth, seeking the high roads of heaven, where the sun day-long shines unveiled, and the moon walks amid the cloudless stars. Thus they passed swiftly over Dor Nufoglith, and over Taur Nufuin, and came above the hidden valley of Tumladen. No cloud nor mist lay there, and looking down, Lúthien saw far below, as a white light starting from a green jewel, the radiance of Gondolin the fair, where Turgon dwelt. But she wept, for she thought that Beren would surely die. He spoke no word, nor opened his eyes, and knew thereafter nothing of his flight. And at last the eagles set them down upon the borders of Doriath, and they were come to that same dell whence Beren had stolen in despair and left Lúthien asleep. There the eagles laid her at Beren's side and returned to the peaks of Chrysaegrim and their high eyries. But Huan came to her, and together they tended Beren, even as before when she healed him of the wound that Curufin gave to him. But this wound was fell and poisonous. Long Beren lay, and his spirit wandered upon the dark borders of death, knowing ever an anguish that pursued him from dream to dream. Then suddenly, when her hope was almost spent, he woke again, and looked up, seeing leaves against the sky, and he heard beneath the leaves singing soft and slow beside him, Lúthien Tenuvio. And it was spring again. Thereafter, Beren was named Erchamion, which is the one-handed, and suffering was graven in his face, but at last he was drawn back to life by the love of Lúthien, and he arose, and together they walked in the woods once more. And they did not hasten from that place, for it seemed fair to them. Lúthien indeed was willing to wander in the wild, without returning, forgetting house and people and all the glory of the elf kingdoms. And for a time, Beren was content. But he could not for long forget his oath to return to Menegroth, nor would he withhold Lúthien from Thingol forever. For he held by the law of men, deeming it perilous to set at naught the will of the Father, save at the last need. And it seemed also to him unfit that one so royal and fair as Lúthien should live always in the woods as the rude hunters among men, without home or honor or the fair things which are the delight of the queens of the Eldalie. Therefore, after a while, he persuaded her, and their footsteps forsook the houseless lands, and he passed into Doriath, leading Lúthien home. So their doom willed it. Upon Doriath, evil days had fallen. Grief and silence had come upon all its people when Lúthien was lost. Long they had sought for her in vain, and it is told that in that time Daeron, the minstrel of Thingol, strayed from the land and was seen no more. He it was that made music for the dance and song of Lúthien before Beren came to Doriath, and he had loved her and set all his thought of her in his music. He became the greatest of all the minstrels of the elves east of the sea, named even before Maglor, son of Feanor. But seeking for Lúthien in despair, he wandered upon strange paths, and passing over the mountains, he came into the east of Middle-earth, where for many ages he made lament beside dark waters for Lúthien, daughter of Thingol, most beautiful of all living things. In that time Thingol turned to Melian, but now she withheld her counsel from him, saying that the doom he had devised must work to its appointed end, and that he must wait now upon time. But Thingol learned that Lúthien had journeyed far from Doriath, for messages came secretly from Celegorm, as has been told, saying that Felagund was dead and Beren was dead, but Lúthien was in Nargothrond, and that Celegorm would wed her. Then Thingol was wrathful, and he sent forth spies, thinking to make war upon Nargothrond. And thus he learned that Lúthien was again fled, and that Celegorm and Cúrifin were driven from Nargothrond. Then his counsel was in doubt, for he had not the strength to assail the 7 sons of Feanor. But he sent messengers to Himring to summon their aid in seeking for Lúthien, since Celegorm had not sent her to the house of her father, nor had he kept her safely. But in the north of his realm, his messengers met a peril sudden and unlooked for, the onslaught of Carcharoth, the wolf of Angband. In his madness, he had run ravening from the north, and passing at length over Taur Nufuin. Upon its eastern side, he came down from the sources of Esgalduin, like a destroying fire. Nothing hindered him, and the might of Melian upon the borders of the land stayed him not, for fate drove him, and the power of the Silmaril that he bore to his torment. Thus he burst into the inviolate woods of Doriath, and all fled away in fear. Alone of the messengers, Mablung, chief captain of the king, escaped, and he brought the dread tidings to Thingol. In summary, Beren and Lúthien reached the gate of Angband, which is guarded by Carcharoth, a terrible werewolf raised by Morgoth himself. Lúthien puts Carcharoth to sleep, and they make their way into the throne room of Morgoth. Morgoth lusts after her, and Lúthien takes advantage of this moment to cast her cloak over him and sets on him a powerful dream. His crown of iron falls off, and Beren cuts one of the Silmarils free. He attempts to take another, but his knife breaks and awakens Morgoth. Beren and Lúthien flee and encounter Carcharoth outside the gate. Beren attempts to ward him off with the Silmaril, but Carcharoth bites off his hand with the Silmaril and flees. Beren is near death when Thorondor and the eagles come and bear Beren and Lúthien to Gondolin and into the woods near Doriath. Lúthien and Huan slowly heal Beren. Dark times fall upon Doriath with Lúthien absent. Thingol hears rumors that Finrod and Beren are dead and that Lúthien is to be wed to Celegorm. He is enraged by this and sends out spies, even thinking to make war against Nargothrond, but he learns that Celegorm and Curufin have been banished there. Carcharoth, in his madness and with the Silmaril inside him, breaks through the girdle of Melian and terrorizes Doriath. So, that's this is what's so fascinating for me about this chunk of the story. Pretty much everything we've read so far is covering the creation of the Silmarils and all the fate tied to them and all the things that people are doing. But for like this kind of like this middle third of the book, no one has even come close to retrieving a Silmaril.
Yeah.
This is like by far the furthest that anyone has come to retrieving one of the Silmarils.
It's similar to the conquest in the War of the Ring, where it's the smallest and what would be the most hopeless and the most meek, and overlooked that finds a way somehow. So it's never through the the big battle trying to push back the evil. It's through it's like the love and the cleverness, the skill of Lúthien is just amazing. How she comes in and she has her part to play. She's not just tagging along. Like, she casts a spell on Carcharoth and on Morgoth, and it's just so cool. I would love to see this as a film. Can you imagine Beren and Lúthien as a film? Like, you have the beginning of the film is similar to how Lord of the Rings starts, where it just catches you up to speed on the history of the Silmarils. It's like, the creation of the world, the Silmarils, the capture of them, and now we're into the story. And it's just Beren and Lúthien's story would be amazing.
I would watch that.
For sure.
It'd be awesome. Have you read the, because there's a standalone book, isn't there, Beren and Lúthien?
I have not read that.
Cameron, you read it? I feel like this is...
No, I haven't read a
up your
standalone
street.
book. But there was like a collection of the poems, like similar to the song you read. There's like a whole series of songs that tell their story, I think.
I mean, there's a standalone story, and there's a beautiful
cool.
version of it with Easton Press.
Really?
Check this out.
Send it to me.
Thanks.
Oh wait, we want to add it to the stream. Here we go.
Yeah, just have a look at it.
Whoa. Yeah, that's nice.
Wait, hold on. This is different than what we've read?
Yeah, this is a standalone story. So I think it was probably released after Tolkien's death. It's $111.
Ooh, only 3 monthly installments of $37.
I mean, you can get
That's
other
beautiful,
versions
though.
of it. Yeah, it's really beautiful. You can get other versions that are cheaper, normal price, but look at that binding.
I know, it's
Eastern
beautiful.
Press books are really good.
Eastern Press.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually just ran into someone who's reading that. They don't think that, he doesn't have that copy, but I was like, can I borrow that when you're done? I'd love to read that too.
Yeah, I bet it's well good.
So, okay, so you got Carcharoth or Carcharoth, the Red Maw, the Jaws of Thirst.
On Fog.
What a beast!
So good.
It's kind of like what you said, where it's interesting because there's like the father of werewolves, and he dies, but this is like in some sense more evil and more powerful than even his father. Like, he's raised by Morgoth with living flesh
In an unnatural way, too. Yeah, on living flesh, which is probably not, I don't know. The way it's described, it sounds like
werewolves, I think that's the normal diet of werewolf. Living flesh.
That's true. Yeah, it's alive before it's dead.
I don't know.
put his
I don't know any
power
werewolves
upon him.
personally.
Um,
And I have an observation too.
yeah.
So when they do eventually get into, they come to Morgoth's throne. It says that Morgoth looked upon her beauty. When he did this, conceived in his thought an evil lust and a design more dark than any that had yet come into his heart since he fled Valinor. He's done some evil stuff since he's fled from Valinor. He's killed a lot of people. He's
Yeah.
like bred orcs. He's done, but I think kind of what it's saying too is just that in many ways what he's done now is lust after objects, the Silmarils, but the lust after a person is like that much darker, and the core of it is that much more evil.
Hmm.
And you'd imagine the twisting of Luthien would be like a more evil act than the twisting of
Right,
another
because she's like the
elf or
pinnacle
something.
of beauty in Middle Earth. So
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty awesome that Beren's hand got
yeah,
bitten
what
off.
is this, a Star Wars movie?
Yeah. But Carcharoth's his swiftly all his innards were filled with a flame of anguish. And the Silmaril seared his
We've all
accursed
been
flesh.
there.
And it like drove him insane, basically.
It reminds me of the time I got pepper sprayed. I was like, I just ran out of the building screaming like a madman.
That was bad.
You ran away.
Well,
Pepper sprayed, and then
he
you
couldn't-
start sprinting,
couldn't handle it. Yeah, he ran to the nearest grocery store and
trying to
got
run away
milk.
from the pain.
He was just pouring milk over his
God.
face for hours, by the way. This lasted like probably 6 or 7 hours.
No,
Oh,
it wasn't
man.
that long. It was an afternoon. It was like 3 hours of.
Was it
the
just
most
3
intense-
hours? It was,
Maybe 4 at the most. It was the most intense pain I've ever felt in my whole life, though. So
yeah. But I mean, that's basically what he was feeling, Carcharoth. And then,
Yeah.
but that drove him insane. And he goes off to, he runs away, just like Carcharoth.
You know how Tolkien left a lot to our imagination with Angband and Morgoth, and it's like we always just heard about this subterranean throne, and
mhm.
it's dark. There's monsters down there, but he just wrote the heck out of that scene. Like the way he describes it is so compelling. You know, for they came to the seat of Morgoth in his nethermost hall that was upheld by horror, lit by fire, and filled with weapons of death and torment. And the way like Morgoth falls, like his head is bowed down by the weight of the Silmarils, and he falls like a hill sliding an avalanche, and hurled like thunder from his throne, lay prone on the floors of hell. Just so good.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
love Tolkien's descriptions of things.
He's so good.
Yeah.
Wait, what page was that on?
That's 181. What Cameron just read.
Yep.
Top of 181.
And where
That was
did
tough.
Beren get Angrist, that knife again?
So that was in our previous reading.
Yeah.
He took it from, I think, Cúrifin when they attacked him. Remember he had...
Isn't
I
it
think
interesting that it's that knife he uses?
Yeah.
Like
it
I
was
wonder
interesting.
how else he would have got the Silmaril out.
It's kind of that providential thing, right?
Yeah.
Like so in the previous reading, he was like on top of Cúrifin strangling him or something. And Luthien said, like, let him go. And so he just took his knife and took his weapons and stuff. And that's what he had to cut this. I mean, it is interesting that they must be like a powerful knife, right? Because eventually it did break, but
Yeah.
it's like Morgoth's crown, you know. They must just be enchanted and protected and all this.
Right.
Yeah, or I wonder if it was the Silmaril that broke it.
Possibly. Yeah. Wow.
I think
Here's
I have,
a
a
fire-
different, I think
here's
I have
a-
a different translation than you guys, because you said at the top of 181.
Yeah.
Yeah, that paragraph there. The
what
last
does it,
Bottom of the first paragraph.
Suddenly he fell as a hill.
okay. No, I'm in the one describing the like the weapons and
Oh, that's in the bottom of
Oh,
180.
that's the bottom of
last paragraph
180.
180.
okay.
Is yours in British?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the problem. You know what? While you're looking at that, one of our mutual friends, a Scotsman of notoriety, said he was listening to the show and he thought that you've lost your English accent completely. You sound like
No,
a Texan.
Dan still has it. He was in England and they received him with open
Yeah,
arms.
they did.
And,
So he just hasn't listened for long enough.
Well, he said like, "Oh, that Dan, he's always trying to play up his English."
What? Dan walks both. He
Tell him to get a
straddles both
haircut next time you
countries.
see him.
Okay, I will. Speaking of pepper spray, at the bottom of 181, when Beren cries out, "Here is a fire that shall consume you." That's how I felt, and all evil things. That's what pepper spray is for.
Political.
Well, pepper sprays to like stop an assailant, like you're about to be mugged or something. you
Okay,
pepper spray.
Mr.
Yeah.
NRA.
Oh man, Greg.
I didn't realize I was going to get so much flack for this. For pepper spray. Oh.
Thorondor comes back.
Yeah. Okay, that's one of those things. It makes me, there's that How It Should Have Ended Lord of the Rings thing where like they just ride by eagles to Mount Doom and throw the ring in.
Yeah.
They keep showing up like a little bit after the action's over. They don't really help that much. They just kind of
They help when hope is lost, I think. When it's like, no, hope is lost, and if Thorondor doesn't do something, like, hope is lost. I think that's the moment they seem to step in. Is when there's no one else.
Interesting. They're very interesting. They kind of watch, they wait, they're patient. But they
Gotta be a Titanic reference there, right?
No, it's not.
Oh.
No, I just made that sentence up. But actually though, isn't wow, we're going way back.
I think Rose in the Titanic has a Silmaril at the end. Doesn't she drop a Silmaril in the water?
Good point. She does, yeah. Because her family won it. Her in-laws, the orcs.
Yeah, she didn't care about the riches.
Yeah.
And
you guys spoiled the reference I was gonna make at the end of the book. Ugh, I can't.
Oh, you had a joke you were waiting to use for days and weeks?
We will forget.
I've been saving this for the end, yeah.
Okay,
we will forget.
It'll be even funnier.
Yeah.
So, okay, what I was going to say was that Manwë, remember Manwë, King of the Valar?
I do.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about him in a while, but he's like this, he's the one connected with the eagles.
Yeah.
And that's what he does. He watches, he sees things. So it does make sense that they also just watch and wait.
Yeah, it's an example of the Valar influencing the timeline of Middle Earth without them, walking around in some shoes and, lifting things up and doing things. Mm-hmm. It's if you see Thorondor, the will of Manwë is at play.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's unclear whether the great music that happened at the very beginning, it's unclear whether that was like the complete playing out of history in musical form, and then now it's in physical form. And if it is the playing out of the music in physical form, then everybody has their part. And so the way things are that way because that's the way they are. That's the way it was kind of played out, and that's the way it's going to play out. So the criticism of, well, why don't the Eagles step in, or why don't the Ainur step in, or whatever you want to say, doesn't really work because the story has its own purposes, and that's okay. You could probably always logic a better outcome of a story.
Yeah, that's true. And it's funny that you say that because something I was just thinking about, there are some repetitive elements of this single story of Beren and Luthien. Like Beren keeps getting hurt and Luthien keeps healing him.
Yeah.
And but it's not like it's not taking anything away from the story that's happened multiple times. It's just something like, it's kind of what you were saying earlier, Cameron, that Beren just goes into everything he does. Like he knows the purpose of what he's doing and he walks into danger, and usually he's left like battered and broken. But Luthien just sticks with him and puts that stake on his face over his black eye and
The ham.
makes him bitter. Yeah, the ham. The ham.
The wolf ham.
We're gonna get our producer's gonna be so mad about that.
What I don't understand is that it's like it seemed like time had passed quite a while, and Beren has still got that ham. He's like kept it, and then he keeps wearing it. He's like attached to it. It's like kind of weird. It's like, dude, you just like let it go now.
It's like smells terrible.
Yeah.
And it's like rotting.
It's like rotting and just
It's like a man will wear like
he's like, no, I'm a
hats.
wolf.
Yeah, I think so.
I need to find that dog suit man that you mentioned in the last episode.
No, it's not.
What
worth it.
why do I search? Dog suit
disturbing.
man or
Sure.
Daily Wire covered it.
what's that?
Okay, last thing.
Why would you do that? Last thing and then mute yourself. The end.
Okay. I love this that Carcharoth or I don't know if CH is a K sound.
It's pronounced as like Carcharoth.
Carcharoth.
Yeah.
The wolf of Longvan. He just like runs into Doriath terrorizing everybody. That's where we left off. That's where we're leaving it here. He just, in his madness with the Silmarillion inside of him, he just starts tearing things apart.
Yeah, he's gone insane. Actually,
You would if you swallowed pepper spray.
Well, Cameron and I went to Buffalo Wild Wings once and ate the really hot ones there.
Uh-huh.
And Cameron went a little bit wild after that, painted the town red, and is not allowed back in Minnesota. Actually, that's why he left.
All right, I think well. Please, give us your thoughts on this. We were a little unhinged today, but give us your thoughts on Discord. Send us an email if you'd like. If you like what I should give a shout out for one of the emails.
Oh yeah, love that.
We did receive an email saying that we should actually read Guy K. We should read Guy K. We shouldn't just make him a joke. He's like actually a good author. So
we love Guy K. We've
never met Guy K.
No, but if Tolkien loves him,
it's love at first. Hear his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he's good enough for Tolkien, he's good enough for us. You know, it would be
awesome to have him on. We'd love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one day. So if you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Or if you thought this episode was just okay, maybe drop down to a 2 out of 3.
Yeah, just give us 2 out of 3.
Yeah. Which
Follow
is
us
like
everywhere.
66%. So when you convert
it's
that
basically
into
4
stars,
out of 5, to be honest.
Yeah, just round it up.
Yep.
And if you can round it up to 4, you might as well round it up.
Yep, and follow us everywhere.
It's basically 5.
And join us on Discord, join the discussion, and send any comments to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next time as we read the greatest story you never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.